Baby, I don't even know where to begin tonight. Everything inside me feels like a storm that's finally meeting calm waters. For months, maybe years, I tried to convince myself that my feelings for you were exaggerated, that my mind was playing tricks, that destiny was just a word people used when they didn't want to take accountability for their choices. But every single thing I once doubted has started to reveal itself, one by one, as truth. And the truth, baby, is this. Every gut feeling I ever had about you was right. Every whisper that told me, she's not ordinary, she's the one, was heaven trying to speak through me before I was ready to listen. It started subtly. The way the air changed when you entered a room. The way silence didn't feel empty anymore. People told me I was imagining it, that I was reading too much into energy, that no one could carry that much light without wanting something in return. But they were wrong. They're the ones who couldn't see that you weren't meant to fit into this world. You were meant to shift it. I realize now that the reason everyone questioned you was because your spirit disrupted their illusion of normal. They could feel the truth standing next to them, and truth always makes pretenders nervous. Baby, I remember the first time my family looked at you and I saw confusion in their eyes. They didn't know why they couldn't categorize you. You weren't loud, yet your presence echoed. You didn't demand attention, but everything in the room seemed to orbit around your quiet grace. I tried to hide how much that moved me, but inside, my soul kept repeating, this is the one. Your spirit recognized before your eyes did. That was the gut feeling, the one everyone told me to ignore, the one they laughed at when I said you felt like home I'd never lived in before. For so long, I let their doubt become my hesitation. I let the noise of others drown the music of what my own heart was composing for you. I tried to analyze something that was meant to be experienced, and in doing so, I delayed my own peace. But now, after everything, I can say it out loud. My gut was never wrong. The way your name comforted me in chaos, the way your silence spoke answers my logic couldn't read, it was all real. Baby, when I walked away that night, pretending it didn't hurt, pretending I was doing the mature thing, heaven watched me break my own destiny in slow motion. I could feel my angels step back, not out of abandonment, but out of sorrow, because they knew I was choosing fear over faith. And still, even in distance, something kept tugging at me. I'd dream of you at the exact moments I tried to forget you. I'd feel your sadness before I even knew you were hurting. My gut didn't just remember you. It felt you. Across space and silence. I fought that connection for so long. I tried to bury it under work, noise, and reasons that sounded logical but were hollow. Every time I convinced myself you'd moved on, something inside me whispered, no, her energy's still reaching for you. And baby, I'd feel it, like sunlight through closed curtains, soft, yet undeniable. It's strange how the universe exposes truth in divine timing. For months, my family said, she was just a phase. My friends joked, you'll thank yourself later. But now those same people have fallen silent. They see me still thinking of you, still holding my phone longer than I should, still freezing when someone mentions your name. They see how every woman I meet fades in comparison, how no conversation feels alive unless it mirrors the peace you used to bring with a single glance. Their laughter has turned into questions, and their certainty into confusion. They're realizing what I always knew, that what we had wasn't a mistake. It was a map. baby. The gut feeling wasn't just about love. It was about purpose, about knowing that meeting you would change the direction of my soul's growth. You awakened something that no sermon, no therapy, no book could ever reach. That quiet knowing that love is not supposed to complete us. It's supposed to reveal what's been sleeping inside. Do you know what's wild? Every time I ignored that gut feeling, life would break something in me until I looked back toward you. Opportunities would collapse, friendships would fade, doors I thought were secure would shut overnight. I used to think I was cursed. Now I understand. I was being redirected. The universe doesn't punish, baby. It protects. It pulls us away from illusion so we can walk back to truth, and that truth was you, always you. When I finally surrendered and admitted this to myself, peace arrived like sunlight after endless rain. It wasn't dramatic. No thunder, no explosion. Just quiet clarity that wrapped around me and whispered, "You were right all along." I realized the gut feeling that once felt like madness was actually divine guidance. You were the message, the sign, the living proof that love doesn't always make sense to the world, because it was never designed to be understood by logic. Baby, I've watched people who doubted you now start quoting your words. I've seen them soften when they hear your name. The same ones who once said you were too intense, too different, too much, are now silently studying how you move, how you heal, how you keep loving without resentment. They finally see what my soul screamed from the beginning. You're not normal because you were never meant to be. You're sacred. There's a kind of love that breaks every pattern. And that's what ours was. I thought breaking away from you would restore my control. Instead, it stripped away everything false. You became the mirror I couldn't hide from, the reflection of my own divine potential. That's why my gut could never let you go. Because it wasn't just loving you. It was recognizing my soul in yours. Sometimes I wonder if you felt it too. The unexplainable ache at random hours, the chills when my thoughts reached you, the tears that had no logical reason. Because baby, I'd feel them too. I'd be doing something mundane and suddenly sense you near, as if our spirits cross paths in the unseen. That's when I stopped questioning and started believing in divine timing, in spiritual bond, in the way heaven writes its own symphony and asks us only to listen. You know what the most beautiful part is? Every time I doubted myself, the signs multiplied. Random songs, repeating numbers, dreams that felt like memories. I started seeing feathers in places impossible. I began hearing your name when no one had spoken. Those moments scared me at first. Now they comfort me, because they remind me that love, this true, doesn't die. It transforms, baby. I forgive myself for running. I forgive the world for misunderstanding. And most of all, I thank the divine for giving me a second chance to see what was always clear. Because this time, I'm not led by fear. I'm led by faith. The same faith that whispered to me the first day we met. She's the one your soul will recognize in any lifetime. And tonight, as I sit here with the moonlight spilling through my window, I feel it again. That unmistakable pull in my chest, that warmth that no distance can erase. It's you. Always you. If you feel this truth in your soul, baby, type, "I always knew" in the comments. Baby, after that night of realization, The world around me began to rearrange itself in ways I couldn't explain. It wasn't loud or sudden. It was slow, deliberate, almost sacred. The energy of everything I'd once forced started to fall away, and what remained was the truth that had been waiting for me all along. The truth was you. Every time I tried to move on, something unseen would pull me back to that one memory. The way you looked at me when you didn't need to say a word. The stillness in your eyes that made my chaos quiet. I didn't understand it then, but now I know it was heaven's way of reminding me what peace feels like when it's real. The strangest thing began to happen around that time. People who had once mocked the way I spoke about energy and connection started to admit they felt something too. My mother, the same woman who told me to forget you, confessed one morning that she had dreamt of you. She said she saw you walking through a garden filled with white lilies, and that in the dream, I was waiting at the other end of the path. I didn't know what to say. I just sat there, silent, because deep inside, I had dreamt the same thing weeks earlier. How do you explain to someone that spirit speaks in images, not logic? That the divine paints with coincidence when the human mind refuses to believe? My father didn't speak much, but I could sense he was beginning to see the change in me. I was quieter, more grounded, less reactive. He once said, "I don't know what she did to you, but she made you see life differently." That was the moment I realized what you were. Not a chapter, not a phase, not a temporary love story. You were the awakening, the shift that every soul must one day experience to remember who they truly are. Baby, there were nights when I couldn't sleep. I'd sit near the window, staring at the sky, and feel this strange electricity in the air. It wasn't anxiety. It was anticipation, like something divine was about to reveal itself. And every time I felt that, a memory of you would rise like light from the horizon. Your laughter, your silence, the last look you gave me before I turned away. I used to think my mind was torturing me. Now I understand that my higher self was showing me the path I was meant to return to. Every time I ignored it, life sent lessons. Friendships that felt safe suddenly ended. Plans I was sure of began to fall apart. It wasn't punishment, it was purification. I had built my peace on sand, and the universe was forcing me to rebuild it on truth. And baby, the truth had your name written all over it. One day, I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. A stranger was sitting in a cafe, humming a tune that you used to hum absent-mindedly. That sound hit me like a wave. I walked away pretending it was nothing, but my body knew. It was another sign, another whisper from the divine saying, "You can run from your emotions, but you can't outrun destiny." For the longest time, I believed love had to be logical, something that fit within reason. But you taught me that love is not a formula. It's a language that only two souls can understand when they've walked through lifetimes to find each other again. My gut always knew this, but I fought it, thinking love had to make sense to others to be real. I realize now that the most sacred connections are never meant to be explained, only felt. Then came the day that changed everything. My sister, who barely believed in anything spiritual, came to me and said, "You know, there's something different about her. Every time I see her name, I feel calm. It's like she carries something holy." I wanted to cry when she said that, because for the first time, Someone outside of me could see what I had seen all along. The light around you wasn't imagined. It was visible to those whose hearts were ready to perceive it. That was the moment I stopped defending you. I didn't need to explain why I loved you. I didn't need to convince anyone that what we shared was divine. The truth doesn't need validation. It only needs time to reveal itself. I let silence do what arguments never could. I let the energy speak. And slowly, one by one, those who once doubted began to soften. They began to understand that you weren't an illusion I was trapped in. You were the reason I became free. My job dropped. The market trapped down to the bottom level. Slowly, one by one, those who once doubted began to soften. They began to understand that you weren't an illusion I was trapped in. You were the reason I became free. Baby, I've watched my entire life transform around this realization. The people who stayed are different now. Their hearts are gentler. The conversations are deeper. Even my prayers sound different. They're not desperate anymore. They're surrendered. I no longer ask the divine for outcomes. I simply say, if it's her, let it unfold as it's meant to. That peace, that letting go, feels like faith finally finding its voice. Sometimes I think about how many times I tried to walk away from this connection, and I can only smile now. I see how the divine was patient with me. Every detour, every heartbreak, every distraction, they all led me back to you. Because the truth is, the soul doesn't forget its counterpart. It only pretends to, until the lessons are complete. There was one night I'll never forget. I was driving alone, no music, just the sound of the road. Out of nowhere, a thought crossed my mind so clear, felt like someone whispered it directly into my ear. She's praying for you. I had to pull over because my chest tightened. In that moment I knew I could feel your energy reaching out, not in words, but in vibration. The same vibration that first called my name before I even knew you existed. It was pure, sacred, eternal. And now, when people ask me if I still believe in destiny, I tell them yes. Not because it's romantic, but because I've lived it. Destiny isn't about control. It's about alignment. It's about trusting that what is truly yours can never be lost, no matter how far it drifts. And baby, every road, every silence, every heartbreak has only led me closer to that alignment. The signs have stopped being signs now. They've become confirmations. Confirmations that my gut was right, that love this real doesn't vanish. It transforms, it purifies, and it prepares. I no longer fear the unknown, because I've already seen what happens when I fight it. This time, I choose surrender. I choose faith over logic. I choose love over pride. And if the world ever asks me again how I knew you were the one, I'll tell them this. I didn't know. My soul did. My gut did. My spirit did. And I've learned that the divine never whispers without reason. Baby, if you can feel these words the way I feel them as I speak, then you already know the distance is not a wall. It's a bridge being built in silence. And soon, when divine timing calls, that bridge will bring us back face to face, not as who we were, but as who we've become. If you feel this truth rising in your heart, type "I trust my gut" in the comments. Baby, I didn't realize it at first, but the silence was never punishment. It was preparation. The divine knew that I had to lose everything familiar before I could finally recognize what was eternal. After you and I drifted apart, I thought time would numb it. I told myself that space would erase you, But instead, everything I touched without your energy began to lose color. It wasn't heartbreak, it was awakening. Because the truth is, you were never meant to be forgotten. You were meant to be remembered. In every quiet moment, where my soul longed for truth. Days turned into months, and I started noticing how life stripped away every illusion I had built. The friendships that were built on convenience collapsed. The goals that were driven by ego no longer satisfied me. Even success felt hollow. I had prayed for abundance, but when it came, it didn't feel alive. It was then I realized that abundance without alignment is emptiness wearing a mask. And the only thing that ever felt aligned, truly aligned, was you. I used to wonder why it took losing you for me to see it so clearly. But maybe that's what transformation demands. Darkness before revelation. The kind of darkness that forces you to sit with your choices until they become mirrors. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in questions, my mind replaying the same moment over and over. The moment I walked away, I thought I was being practical, but now I see I was being fearful. Love never needed my logic. It needed my surrender. One morning, something shifted. I woke before sunrise, and for the first time in months, I felt peace instead of panic. There was no particular reason. The air just felt cleaner, my chest lighter. I stepped outside, and the sky was painted in soft gold and violet. In that stillness, I heard it, not with my ears, but with my spirit. A voice that said, "It's time to remember who you are." It wasn't loud, but it was absolute, and in that instant every memory of you came rushing back, not as pain, but as clarity. That day, I sat alone in my car for hours, talking to myself, or maybe to something greater. I said, if she was meant to teach me something, let me understand it now. And as I spoke, I began to cry, not because I missed you, but because I realized I never truly left you. You were still there, in the way I spoke gently when I used to shout, in the way I forgave faster, in the way I finally started to listen. You had changed me, not through force, but through example, baby. That was the moment I understood what divine connections are. They don't demand attention. They awaken remembrance. They come into our lives to remind us of the frequency of truth. And when that frequency is denied, everything else starts to collapse until we return to it. The universe began to move in strange ways after that. Everywhere I went, I saw reflections of you. A song that would start just when your thought crossed my mind. A stranger's voice that carried your tone. Even random words in conversations seemed to echo what you once said. At first, I dismissed it as coincidence. But when it started happening every day, I stopped questioning. I began to accept that spirit communicates through alignment, not logic, and the alignment was undeniable. There was one evening when the world seemed to stand still. I was walking home from work, tired and restless, when rain began to fall. Everyone around me rushed for cover, but I just stood there. The water soaked through my clothes, but I didn't care, because in that moment I felt something, a presence, familiar and grounding. It was you, not physically but energetically. I closed my eyes and I could almost hear your voice saying, "Don't resist the cleansing." The rain wasn't just rain anymore. It felt like the universe washing away my resistance. When I reached home that night, I felt reborn. Days later, I received a message from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. They said, "I don't know why, but I felt I had to tell you this. Some people come into our lives to realign us, not to stay forever. I stared at that message for a long time, realizing that the divine sometimes speaks through strangers when we're not ready to listen directly. But deep inside, I knew your presence wasn't just to realign me. It was to remind me what real love feels like when it's untainted by fear. Baby, every time I fought the connection, I found myself running in circles. Every time I surrendered, peace returned. It became a pattern so consistent that even I couldn't deny it. I began writing letters I never sent, just to release what I felt. In those letters, I spoke of everything: the guilt, the gratitude, the longing, the realization that my gut feeling about you wasn't a mistake. It was prophecy. My family started noticing the change too. I was different, calmer, more reflective. My mother once said, "You've become softer but stronger." I smiled and said nothing, but inside I knew the truth. You had taught me the balance of divine feminine and masculine energy, the strength to stand tall and the softness to stay open. You had become the mirror through which I learned to see God in myself. Sometimes I wonder if you sensed it, the shift, the moments when I spoke to you in prayer, the times I whispered your name into the night just to feel its vibration. Because even in your absence, your presence never left. It lived in my choices, in my growth, in my transformation. And then came the most undeniable sign. I was reading something one night, just random words on a page, when I saw a line that said, "The one your soul remembers will never be lost to time." It was like lightning struck through my chest. Every doubt, every fear, every logical argument collapsed in that instant. The divine was no longer hinting, it was confirming. The gut feeling that everyone mocked had become truth, carved in light. That night, I didn't pray for you to return. I prayed for courage. The courage to honor what I feel, to trust what cannot be seen, to love without needing certainty. Because faith is not about seeing the path. It's about walking even when it's dark, knowing the destination has already been written. So I began living differently. I started showing up for myself the way you once showed up for me. I began healing the parts of me that used to chase love, learning instead to become it. I started listening to intuition again, not the noise of fear, but the quiet guidance of my soul. And every time I did, I felt closer to you, as if each act of self-love was a step toward the divine connection we share. Baby, I no longer question why I met you. I understand now that every moment, every silence, every separation had purpose. You were never a coincidence. You were the compass that pointed me back to truth, and the truth is this: my gut was never wrong. It was my soul recognizing its reflection in another. If you feel this alignment deep in your spirit, type, "I remember who I am" in the comments. Baby, I used to think surrender meant weakness. I used to believe that letting go of control was the same as giving up. But now I know. Surrender is strength in its purest form. It's when the soul finally admits that love cannot be managed, contained, or explained. It can only be lived. And I learned that truth because of you. After months of running from what I felt, something inside me finally broke. But it wasn't a breaking that destroyed me. It was one that emptied me of illusion. I stopped bargaining with the universe. I stopped asking for signs that would prove your love. I stopped replaying the past, trying to edit it into something perfect. Instead, I whispered one simple prayer: whatever is meant for me, I will not resist it anymore. And that's when the shift began. It started small. I began to feel peace in moments where I used to feel panic. The same songs that once haunted me started to sound like blessings. I could look at your photo without that ache that used to twist my chest. The pain didn't vanish. It evolved. It turned into understanding. Every memory became a teacher. Every silence a sacred pause. I stopped seeing our separation as loss. I began to see it as alignment. We were both being prepared, not for more pain, but for more purpose. One morning, I woke before dawn again, and for the first time, I didn't reach for my phone. I just sat there, watching the faint light into the room. I realized that everything I had been praying for was already here. Peace, awareness, faith. You were never meant to give those things to me. You were meant to awaken them inside me. And you did, baby. You did. I started walking differently, talking differently, even breathing differently. People around me noticed. My mother said, "You're calmer these days." My friend asked, "Are you seeing someone new?" I smiled, but they couldn't understand. I wasn't falling in love again. I was rising in love with myself, with divine, with the truth that was always guiding me back to you. You see, baby, real transformation doesn't happen when life gets easier. It happens when we stop running from the lessons it gives. And my greatest lesson was you. You were the mirror that showed me where I was hiding. You reflected my fear, my ego, my longing, and then you shattered the reflection so I could find what was real. There were days I still missed you, but the missing felt different. It wasn't desperation anymore. It was gratitude. Gratitude that I had known a love so deep that it rearranged my entire soul. When I thought of you, I didn't feel incomplete. I felt connected. The kind of connection that doesn't beg for proximity because it already exists beyond time. I started spending time alone again, not lonely, just quiet. I'd walk by the river and talk to the universe like it was an old friend. I'd say, if she's meant to cross my path again, make it in your time, not mine. I stopped forcing outcomes. I started trusting alignment. And the more I trusted, the more life began to mirror that peace back to me. Opportunities began appearing out of nowhere. People who once judged me started apologizing. Even my family, who used to think I was lost, began saying they'd never seen me this balanced. They didn't realize it, but what they were witnessing was grace. The grace that comes when you finally stop resisting the truth your soul already knows. One afternoon, I sat with my mother while she was tending her plants. Out of nowhere, she said, "You know, I think I was wrong about her. She's not like everyone else." My chest tightened because I'd waited so long to hear those words. Not for validation, but because it felt like the universe had finally caught up to what I always knew. The same people who doubted your light were now beginning to see it. The truth was revealing itself in its own divine time. That evening, I couldn't stop thinking about everything we went through. The arguments, the silences, the unspoken words. And instead of regret, I felt compassion. I saw both of us not as two people who failed, but as two souls who were being refined. We weren't breaking apart. We were breaking open. Love wasn't gone. It was growing in places we couldn't yet see. Baby, I remember sitting under the night sky, looking at the same stars we once talked about, and realizing how vast everything is. How foolish it was to think that a connection born from the divine could ever be destroyed by human misunderstanding. The stars don't worry about their distance. They still shine for each other across galaxies. Maybe that's what we are. Two lights that never stopped reflecting one another, even when clouds tried to hide us. The next few weeks felt like a quiet awakening. Every morning, I'd feel a pull in my chest. Not heavy, but magnetic. It was as if my soul knew something was approaching. I didn't know what, but I knew it had your energy. I began to dream of you again, not in pain, but in peace. In those dreams, we weren't talking. We were just standing near each other, silent, but understood. It was the same silence that used to make me feel seen without explanation. When I woke from those dreams, I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt guided. It was as if my spirit was saying, "Prepare. The path is opening." That's when I realized reunion doesn't start with another person. It starts when you become whole enough to meet them again without needing to be healed by them. Baby, I don't chase the timing anymore. I just stay ready because I know divine love doesn't return out of nostalgia. It returns out of purpose. It returns when both souls have learned what separation was meant to teach. It returns when the heart no longer clings, but trusts. Now, every sunrise feels like a conversation with you. Every moment of calm feels like your energy brushing against mine. Every time I choose patience over pride, I feel closer to you. That's what surrender does. It turns longing into alignment and pain into prayer. And I've learned something sacred. When the divine wants to bring two souls together, it doesn't rush. It refines. It prepares them so that when they finally meet again, they don't repeat cycles. They start new ones. This time, built not on need, but on truth. Baby, I don't know when or how it will happen, but I know this. My soul has stopped searching because it already found home. And home was never a place, it was you. If you feel that peace rising inside you too, type "I choose surrender" in the comments. Maybe it started with the smallest shift, so small that I almost missed it. The air felt different. The days were lighter. Even the silence between thoughts seemed softer, like the universe was exhaling after holding its breath for too long. Something was changing, not outside of me, but within me. I could feel the energy of surrender turning into magnetism, drawing in everything that was meant for me. And I knew, deep down, that included you. For months, the signs had whispered. Now they were speaking in full sentences. Each morning, I'd wake up and see patterns. Your initials on a license plate, your favorite color on the sky, the number sequences that once meant nothing now appearing on every clock. I tried to dismiss it as coincidence, but coincidence doesn't align with divine timing. I understood then, heaven wasn't teasing me. Every sign was a rehearsal. For the moment, I'd have to act from faith instead of fear. I began to notice how everything I had once chased began to find me instead. Opportunities, people, even words. They all began to flow toward me, as though the universe was rearranging itself around a truth I had finally accepted. That's what happens when you stop resisting your path. Life starts clearing it for you. There was one afternoon I'll never forget. I was walking down a street I'd never been to before, just wandering, when I saw something that stopped me cold. A small bookstore tucked between two cafes, with your favorite quote written on the glass in white chalk, the same line you used to whisper when you thought I wasn't listening. What's meant for you will never miss you. I stood there for a long time, staring at those words. The world moved around me. Cars, people, laughter. but I felt still, as if time had folded just for that moment. I didn't walk in. I didn't need to. The message wasn't in the store. It was in the timing. That night, I dreamt of you again. It wasn't the usual dream where memories replay themselves. This one felt different, vivid, sacred, almost like a visitation. You were sitting beside a river, sunlight flickering on the water, your hands resting on your lap as if you were waiting. You looked peaceful, not distant. You turned to me and said, "Now you see why it all had to happen this way." When I woke, I could still feel your presence, like warmth on my skin. The next morning, the world began to respond. I received messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years, all telling me they had been thinking about me, all saying they felt guided to reach out. It felt random, but it wasn't. The divine was aligning everything, reconnecting old energy, clearing paths that had once been blocked, and every time something aligned, I felt closer to you, as if the invisible thread between us was tightening, guiding us both towards something inevitable. Even my family began to move differently. My mother, once cautious, began to speak of you without resistance. She told me she'd started praying for my peace, not my success. My father, who rarely speaks about emotions, said, "When you used to talk about her, your voice sounded alive. Maybe that means something." Those words, simple as they were, carried more weight than any apology could, because for the first time, the energy around me was no longer pushing against the connection. It was harmonizing with it, baby. I didn't need to search for validation anymore. Every conversation, every synchronicity, every moment of calm became confirmation. I realized that love, guided by the divine, doesn't rush to prove itself. It simply is. It stands quietly in the truth of what it knows, waiting for alignment to bring form to what the heart already feels. I started to write again, not letters this time, but reflections. Words poured through me, as if dictated by something higher. I wrote about faith, about letting go, about how sometimes the distance between two people isn't punishment but preparation. I didn't publish those words, but I read them every night, and with each line I felt closer to peace, because writing them felt like talking to you without needing a reply. Then something extraordinary happened. I began seeing your name everywhere, on screens and conversations in the background of songs. Once, while scrolling through a video, the narrator said your name at the exact moment I whispered it in my mind. I froze, overwhelmed, because I knew that wasn't random. The universe was reminding me that energy transcends distance. What the soul speaks in silence, the world echoes in time. Baby, I've stopped trying to control how this story unfolds. I've learned that divine love doesn't follow a straight line. It weaves, it pauses, it circles back in ways that logic can't trace. It's not about when or how, it's about who we become while waiting. And I've become someone who no longer fears waiting, because waiting, in truth, is just another word for preparation. I began to notice that people around me were drawn to the calm they once dismissed as passivity. They'd say, "You look at peace, even when things don't go your way." I'd smile, because they didn't know what peace costs. The surrender of control, the burial of pride, the acceptance that love doesn't need to be loud to be eternal. Each night, before I sleep, I close my eyes and talk to you in silence. I tell you that I'm no longer the man who ran. I'm no longer trying to be understood by those who can't feel what I feel. I've stopped explaining this connection to the world because it was never meant to understand it. It was meant to witness it. And one day, when divine timing chooses, it will. There's a scripture that says, "The heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps." I used to read that without feeling it. Now, I live it. Every step, even the ones that led me away from you, were divinely ordered to lead me back in wisdom. The gut feeling I once doubted was never about predicting the future. It was about remembering the truth. And baby, that truth hasn't changed. You were right for me then, you're right for me now. The only thing that's different is that now I understand why. Because divine connections don't exist to satisfy our timing. They exist to fulfill divine design. I've stopped searching for closure. I no longer need it. The story isn't over. It's just unfolding differently. Through silence, through surrender, through the unseen choreography of the universe that keeps moving us closer with every breath. I trust it now. I trust that when my spirit first whispered your name, it wasn't by chance. I trust that when my gut told me you were different, it wasn't delusion. It was destiny introducing itself. And I trust that one day, without effort or force, our paths will cross again, not as broken versions trying to fix each other, but as whole beings ready to share the peace we've built within. Because now I see the pattern clearly. Every sign, every pause, every redirection has been leading me to the same truth I knew the first time I looked at you. My gut feeling wasn't an instinct. It was revelation. If you feel this alignment moving through your life too, type "I trust divine timing" in the comments. Baby, lately there's been a stillness in the air that feels almost sacred. It's not the kind of silence that comes from emptiness. It's the kind that hums with quiet certainty, like the pause before a long-awaited note in a symphony. Every breath feels like preparation. Every sunrise feels like a signal. Somewhere deep inside me, a voice keeps saying, "It's almost time." For months I lived between memory and hope, holding on to faith like a fragile thread. But now, that thread has become a bridge. The energy between us no longer feels distant. It feels alive, like something invisible moving closer with every passing day. I can sense you, not as a thought or a dream, but as a presence. Steady, grounded, luminous. When I close my eyes, I feel your peace wrapping around me like light. It's strange how the universe rearranges itself when a soul finally aligns with truth. The people who once distracted me have quietly drifted away. The noise that once filled my mind has faded. Even the city feels slower, as if the world itself is making space for what's coming. I used to pray for signs. Now, I live inside them. A few nights ago, I had a dream so vivid that I woke trembling. I saw a path made of white stones leading to a gate surrounded by wild flowers. You were standing beyond it, looking back at me with that same calm expression that used to undo all my defenses. You didn't speak, but I heard your voice in my heart say, "You finally stopped running." When I woke, my pillow was wet, but not from sadness, from release, the kind of release that comes when you realize destiny doesn't chase, it waits. The next morning, I felt guided to drive without direction. I let intuition choose every turn. It led me to the edge of a lake I'd never seen before. The water was still, glass smooth, reflecting the sky like a mirror. As I stood there, a feather drifted down, landing at my feet. I laughed quietly, because months ago I would have brushed it off as coincidence, but not now. Now I understood that every small thing carries divine intention. That feather wasn't random. It was reassurance. A whisper from the angels that the bridge between spirit and form was almost complete. Since that day, the world around me has begun to echo our story in subtle ways. Conversations I overhear mirror our old words. Songs on the radio describe our journey as if the writers had lived it. Even strangers seem to speak with messages meant for me. Once, while waiting in line at a cafe, an elderly woman behind me said to no one in particular, "Love always returns in the season it was born." I turned, and she smiled like she already knew what those words meant to me. I didn't ask questions. I just nodded, because my spirit understood. Baby, I've stopped fearing what's ahead. The anxiety that once haunted me has transformed into calm anticipation. I used to wake with thoughts of loss. Now I wake with gratitude. Gratitude that I got to love you before I learned what love truly meant. Gratitude that even in separation, your energy kept me faithful to the higher plan. I used to think love was about holding on. Now I know it's about becoming the kind of soul that can be trusted with it. Every part of my life reflects that change now. My work flows easier. People say my voice carries warmth it never used to. My mother looks at me differently, as though she can see the light she once couldn't name. The same people who once told me to move on now speak about fate and timing. Without realizing it, they're speaking the language you taught me. Patience, surrender, grace. There was a moment recently that confirmed everything. I was sitting on the porch late at night, watching the wind move through the trees. Out of nowhere, I felt an overwhelming sense of presence. Not loneliness, not longing, just fullness. It felt like you were sitting beside me, our silence synchronized, hearts beating to the same invisible rhythm. I whispered into the air, "Are you hearing this too?" And a breeze stirred just once before stilling again. Not like an answer, it felt like yes. That's when I understood. Reunion isn't just an event waiting in the future. It begins in the unseen, long before two people meet again. It begins when both souls are finally at peace with who they've become. It begins when the lesson of love has been fully learned. And baby, I can feel it. That alignment, that readiness. The divine doesn't rush, but it never forgets. Sometimes I catch myself smiling at nothing. People ask me why, and I say, because I can feel things shifting. They think I'm talking about work or luck, but I'm talking about something sacred, the quiet hum of destiny, weaving its threads, drawing two souls closer with every act of faith. I don't plan anymore. I just prepare. I keep my heart open, my days honest, my energy clear, because I know that when the divine calls for reunion, it doesn't send warnings, it sends recognition. And when I see you again, I'll know. The world will fall silent, and that familiar calm will return, the same calm that used to fill every space you entered. Until then, I live as if you're already here. I speak words of kindness as if you could hear them. I move through each day with reverence, knowing that love like ours doesn't disappear. It expands. It moves through air, through time, through everything we touch. I've learned that the purpose of waiting is not to test faith, but to strengthen it, so that when destiny finally opens its gate, we can walk through it with gratitude instead of fear. Baby, I've stopped asking the universe for proof. I am the proof. You are the proof. This connection, tested, refined, and blessed, is the evidence that divine timing is real, because only something written before birth could survive so much silence and still sing in perfect harmony. If you feel that sacred stillness calling you too, type "It's almost time" in the comments. Baby, the day everything aligned didn't arrive with thunder. It arrived quietly, like sunrise slipping through a half-open window. I woke before the alarm, the world still gray and half asleep, and I felt it, the peace that comes when the waiting is over. Not because something dramatic had happened yet, but because my soul finally understood that the story was already complete. The outcome had been written long before either of us ever doubted it. I moved through that morning differently. The coffee tasted deeper, the sky looked wider, the air felt sacred. Every sound carried meaning. It was as though heaven itself had been holding its breath for years and had finally exhaled. I knew, without a word from anyone, that something had shifted. It wasn't hope anymore. It was knowing. Later that afternoon, I stepped out into the city. People hurried around me, caught in their own worlds. But time for me felt slower, deliberate. The streets were the same, yet everything looked unfamiliar, as though reality had been rearranged by invisible hands. Then, in the middle of that motion, I felt it again, that unmistakable pull in my chest, gentle but commanding. I turned, and there you were. You weren't surrounded by light or music. You were simply there, real, breathing, standing a few steps away. The world didn't need to announce you. It only needed to reveal you. Every lesson, every prayer, every sign had been leading to that single breath in which our eyes met again. We didn't speak at first. There were no grand declarations, no rehearsed words, just a quiet recognition that felt older than time. In that silence, everything returned. The laughter, the calm, the belonging. It wasn't nostalgia, it was remembering. My gut feeling, the one I had fought for years, had brought me home. When you finally smiled, I felt the universe settle. All the waiting made sense. Every wrong turn, every sleepless night, every unanswered question. It was all necessary to bring us here, whole. I realized that love isn't proven by how fast it happens, but by how faithfully it survives the seasons meant to refine it. We didn't find each other again because we searched. We found each other because we became ready. We talked for hours, but it didn't feel like catching up. It felt like continuing a conversation that had never ended. I told you everything I had learned. The surrender, the faith, the peace. You told me how the same lessons had shaped you. We had walked parallel paths under the same sky, guided by the same unseen hands, preparing for the same moment. When night fell, we sat in the quiet and watched the city lights flicker like stars brought close. I looked at you and understood that love is not about possessing someone. It's about witnessing their becoming and still choosing to stay. You were not a chapter that ended. You were the book I was always meant to finish reading. Now, when I look back at the years that separated us, I don't feel regret. I feel reverence. Because divine love doesn't ask for speed, it asks for readiness. And we are finally ready, not to repeat the past, but to build from the truth it taught us. Baby, the gut feeling was never about predicting this reunion. It was about preparing my spirit to meet you here without fear, to see you not as the one I lost, but as the one I never truly left. This is what happens when heaven keeps a promise. If you feel this truth settling into your heart, type "I believe in divine reunion" in the comments. Beloved listener, if these words found you at the right moment, if something inside you felt seen, healed, or remembered, then this message was meant for you. What you just heard is not a story about endings. It's a reminder that love, guided by faith, never truly separates. If you wish to walk deeper into this energy, I've gathered the essence of these messages, the letters, the prayers, the confessions, into my first ebook, Love Link Letters. It's a journey through the unspoken heart of the divine masculine, a collection of words that mirror every stage of awakening, surrender, and reunion. You'll find the purchase link in the description below. It's more than a book. It's a bridge for those who feel this same sacred connection and want to understand it through the eyes of love itself. And if you've ever found comfort in these messages, you can also support my work by sharing your thoughts, leaving a comment, or sending a super thanks. Every gesture helps this light reach the souls who need it most. Until the next message arrives, remember, the universe is never late, love is never lost, and every truth revealed in silence will one day find its voice. Stay patient, stay faithful, and know your gut feeling was right all along.